And to get rid of such a nightmare, let's put our
A sudden end for one of Yemen's most powerful men. Houthi rebels say they killed ousted President Ali Abdullah Saleh during an attack on his convoy in Sana'a. His remains were packed on the back of a pickup truck. In a televised statement, the leader of the Houthis said Saleh was involved in a conspiracy with the Saudi-led coalition to take over Sana'a.
What are the reasons behind this new transfer to the other side? Suddenly you took to the aggressors against your own people?
Saleh had been at Rabu Mansour Hadi, but this partnership with the Houthis collapsed last week, sparking major confrontations between Saleh's forces and the rebels. After days of running street battles, Saleh announced he was ready for dialogue with the Saudi-led coalition if it ended its blockade of Yemen's ports and airports and allowed for more humanitarian aid.
in for a lot more violence.
Saleh and the Houthis pushed out Hadi's government in January 2015 and set up their own administration, prompting the Saudi-led campaign against them. Since then, the country has been split between the Houthi rebels in the north, Hadi's administration in the south, and forces loyal to Saleh. When fighting began among the former allies, it sparked fears of a new front in the war. A war which has already killed nearly 10,000 people, pushed Yemen to the brink of mass starvation, and triggered what the United Nations has called the world's worst humanitarian crisis.
There have been multiple investigations about the atrocities being committed in Yemen. All parties are guilty, whether it's the Houthis, whether it's the Saudi-led coalition, and, the UK and the US are largely complicit in this war as well, through the billions and billions of dollars worth of arms sales to the Saudis.
As Yemen's president, Saleh ruled for more than 3 decades until he was forced to resign during the Arab Spring uprising. But he was able to remain in the country and continued to wield enormous power behind the scenes. It's not yet clear what his death will mean for the fighting on the ground or Yemen's future. Imtiaz Taib, Aljazeera.
Well, Ali Abdullah Saleh was a master of shifting alliances, playing both sides as well as switching them. Hoda Abdulhamid looks back at his eventful life.
He once said that ruling Yemen is like dancing on a snake's head, and no one knew that dance better than Ali Abdullah Saleh, mastering every step throughout a deeply divided poor nation. Born in 1942, as a young man he joined the army and rose to the rank of colonel, before taking part in a coup that later saw him become president of what was then North Yemen at the age of 36. For the next decade, he oversaw fighting with the Communist South. The decline of the Soviet Union weakened his enemies, and in 1990, North and South Yemen became one country, with Ali Abdullah Saleh as its first president. That same year, Iraq's leader Saddam Hussein, a longtime close ally, ordered the invasion of Kuwait. At the UN Security Council, Yemen voted against the use of force, prompting the US to cut off millions in aid.
And I thank the President for his strong support in this war against...
A decade later, he was welcomed back by the West. In October 2000, an attack on the American warship USS Cole off the shores of Yemen killed 17 sailors and injured 39 others. He'd won friends and cash, but did little to fix Yemen's internal problems. A Houthi Shia rebellion in the north and a separatist movement in the south. Critics say that more than a dancer, Saleh was the dark horse of Yemen's tumultuous politics, playing off military and tribes to keep himself in power. The toughest challenge came in 2011. The Arab Spring was sweeping across the Middle East. In Inspired by Tunisia and Egypt, Yemenis filled the streets, protesting against poverty, unemployment, and demanding for a regime change. But dissent was something Saleh never tolerated. Still, Yemenis stood firm, even when the protests turned violent. A few months later, injured in a rocket attack on his compound, Saleh was flown to Saudi Arabia for treatment. His face burned and hands bandaged, he appeared on TV defiant as ever. But this was a weaker president, abandoned by his political allies at home and under intense international pressure to hand over power. With Yemen on the brink of civil war, Gulf countries brokered a deal that saw power transferred to his deputy, Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi, in return for Saleh's immunity from prosecution. After 10 months of protests, many Yemenis were celebrating his ousting, even though the country was in tatters. But Ali Abdullah Saleh had merely gone into the shadows, rehearsing the next step in his snake dance. And merely 3 years later, Saleh was again at the forefront, with a strong of support of the army. He allied himself with Iranian-backed Houthis rebels. They shared a common enemy, his successor Hadi. In 2015, a Saudi-led coalition started a military campaign to restore Hadi to power and imposed a blockade over the country. But the snake charmer was losing direction. Just a few days before his death, Saleh turned his back against the Houthis, signaling a possible return to the Arab fold. It was meant to be another great survival act, but it turned out to be his last. But Abdul Hamid, Aljazeera.
Well, the UN says fighting and Saudi-led airstrikes have now intensified in Sana'a, with many streets blocked by tanks. Humanitarian operations, including flights to and from the capital, have been suspended. The UN has called for a pause in the fighting on Tuesday to help civilians caught up in the violence.
If we could have some sort of pause over a period of time to allow civilians to leave their premises which are unsafe or are caught up in the fighting and go to somewhere safety, and at the same time to get women and children and men away from it who are not military, and to get them much needed support in terms of medical, but also to allow them to get water and food back into their houses while they wait for this tragic situation to pass.
Well, joining me live from New York now is Peter Salisbury. He's an expert on Yemen from the Middle East and North Africa program at the think tank Chatham House. Thanks very much for speaking to us. The alliance between the Houthis and Saleh was always one of tactical convenience, wasn't it? They never really trusted each other, but did you ever expect it to end like this?
Absolutely. This was a marriage of convenience between two groups who never trusted one another, never liked one another, and had a seriously dark history. So Saleh reportedly, allegedly, had ordered the killing of the Houthi movement's founder, Hussein al-Houthi, in 2004. And in 2014, when the Houthis took over in Sana'a, I remember very clearly asking Houthi supporters what would happen with Saleh, and they said at the time, you know, we will deal with him eventually. This was inevitable. The surprise has been the timing that it's happened now, and in many ways it's a demonstration from the Houthi side and from the Saleh side that they didn't believe the front lines in the war were going to change anytime soon, and
that from what you're saying, they will be able to